Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating. Hi, Sonia.
Hi, Carrie.
Sonia, what was your best bite this week?
So, Carrie, I used two of my favorite ingredients, beets and potatoes. And I feel...
I love this. I love this so much.
Right. I mean, I had a whole restaurant named Beetroot. Obviously, beets are a big deal. Of all the beet recipes on earth, the most important to me is borscht. Spelled borscht, but pronounced borscht. It originated in Ukraine. It's obviously popular across the former Soviet Union, continues to be popular. And every single family makes borscht differently.
I was just going to ask, what are the main things that are kind of common to because I just think of borscht as a red soup, but there's also potatoes in them, right?
The thing that borscht must be, above all else, is a sour soup. It has to have a sour element. I actually think there's some root word with that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, typically the sort of flavors of borscht are defined by the earthy sweetness of beets. Beets is across almost every version of it. Of course, there's white versions and green versions too, which we've talked about before, but the most traditional has beets. But the real element you need is something sour. So beets don't have to be included at all, but things like sauerkraut are sometimes included. Lemon juice. My grandmother actually would even add citric acid to hers, which is actually quite a common ingredient around the world. Vinegars. So anything that is sour and acidic needs to be added to this pot of soup. The kind that I'm going to talk about is sort of the most classic, the beet borscht. Some people think that it is served cold. It is more often served hot. There is cold versions, but mostly people eat it hot. There's kind of two camps, the ones that make it with meat and the ones that make the beet borscht vegetarian. And I'm talking about beet borscht here, just to be clear. The kind with meat is usually made with beef. So stewed beef or beef bones or beef broth. My family never ever made it with beef because the other important thing that you add to borscht is sour cream. And in my family, we kept kosher, and so you didn't mix meat and dairy, so we would never have had beef broth with sour cream. Sour cream was so important that you would omit the beef, right? And just keep it vegetarian.
Let's just stop you and say, I have been friends with you for over 15 years, and I know that this is a really important dish to you. You, again, had a restaurant named Beetroot. But I myself am just learning so much about your explanation because I have always thought of borscht as a very red pink soup that is served cold. I've never heard of it having meat in it, but I guess that makes sense that some people put meat in it. But that sour element is also, I think, really interesting because that makes for a really interesting soup.
I'm so glad that you also had that idea of the soup because I love dispelling the misconceptions of borscht. And I have served this to many people who've never had it and they love it. And we used to serve it at a restaurant, but I've served it at events and pop-ups and people are always so surprised. It doesn't taste like beets. It tastes like many other things. And this is really peasant food at its best. Borscht, why it would have had meat, is you stretch that meat. The whole idea of a pot of borscht, the intention of it is always to feed a crowd. This is like the bottomless stone soup.
Yeah, where you're stirring more water into the soup to make sure that there are enough bowls for everyone at your table.
Yes.
I love that idea.
And really, you can spend $20 and feed 50 people. So the recipe that I will share and the recipe that I use is my grandmother's. She told it to me over the phone. I was actually cooking it on a first date and I called her. That's a whole longer story, but the short of it is we had been friends for a while. This is when I was living in Hawaii, and we had agreed that for our first date, we would cook the food of our people. And so I knew I had to make borscht, and I called my grandmother because I was living in Hawaii. I couldn't see her. And she told me the recipe that she makes over the phone. And he built an imu, which is like an underground oven, and cooked a chicken and rice in there. And that was sort of it was very cool. It was like a really memorable date, right? And of course, he loved this soup, and I loved what he cooked. And It's one of the things that empowered me to make it and serve it to more people and to really celebrate it, because also I was made fun of for this soup when I was a kid and I would bring it to school. Absolutely made fun of that it was gross, that it smelled funny, all that stuff.
That's such a tragedy in itself, but also what an amazing thing that you've reclaimed this soup. And I think for me, also knowing how close you are to your grandmother, and I love this idea that you liked this boy and you decided to have a first date. And that's what made you call your grandmother and have her tell you this recipe. And that this recipe has become your recipe that then connects you to so many other people. I think this is really where our food friendship starts. This is where our connections are, because we did not grow up eating the same foods at all. And
No.
we're so much of our conversations are about our differences, but the values are the same. And this idea that you're making
Totally.
a pot of soup and you're feeding it to so many people and you're helping them understand who you are and you're connecting to them and connecting to your ancestors and your family. It's really beautiful.
It's also why we don't yuck anyone's yum.
True.
You are allowed to like what you like. If you don't like borscht, don't make it.
But also be open to trying
Yeah.
it. And I think it's worth also saying in this conversation, I have had your borscht. It is delicious. And it's taught me how to love something that I did not grow up eating.
Yeah, and I think it might surprise you. So I'll just start by saying, again, everyone family has their own recipe. This is my grandmother's. You start by sautéing your onion, your beets, and your carrots together. Instead of mirepoix, this is the flavor base. My grandmother always shredded her beets and carrots. Some people like to cube and dice theirs. The shredded, as you know, makes it sweeter, for one. It kind of melts into the broth. I really like it. And I use a food processor, which also makes it so easy to shred a big batch of vegetables.
That's a great tip. We have a mutual friend named Perry, and every time he sees me, he always says, Sonia just really blew my mind by the fact that carrots are, when they shred them, they're sweeter. He's like, that's what I learned from your podcast. It just makes me laugh so hard.
I love that. Perry actually used to work with my brother, so we have that connection there too. I just love all the connections. Anyway, you saute that. That's your flavor base. You also add in some garlic, a lot of garlic. Borscht requires garlic. So garlic lovers, this is for you.
Like
Then
a
you
head of garlic, like a whole
no,
head,
like
like
no,
just
but like
5
measure
or
with
6
your
cloves.
heart,
Okay.
6, 7,
Yes.
8. Like what
Six.
do your thing. You saute that down. Then you add your water. You don't need to add any broth to this. You can just add water. This is what I think is very, very important. I take a bunch of dill stems and a bunch of parsley stems because you're gonna garnish with lots of fresh herbs. But those dill stems are tougher. At this point, I finely chop them and I add them to the pot. You're never going to see them, but they're going to help flavor this soup. And so that's why you only need water and bay leaf, essential. Then you let that simmer. You let the kind of beets, carrots, onion, dill stems, all that infuse the broth and the
And it
soup,
softens. Yeah.
like for 15 minutes. Then you add a bunch of potatoes. I like to use Yukon Gold. I don't even peel them. It's actually kind of easy as far as soups go. And then you add in,
Just cut them up into little pieces.
yeah, little
Yeah.
bite-sized pieces, whatever size you like. And then you add in a bunch of cabbage, or you could do kale or beet greens, whatever greens you have. Cabbage is traditional, just regular old green cabbage. And you let that simmer until the potatoes are tender, the cabbage is soft. You keep that at a gentle simmer. You can keep it going for a while. It only tastes better. It definitely always tastes better the next day. Oh, I forgot the important ingredient. Tomato puree. When you're adding your water, you add either canned tomatoes or fresh tomatoes if you're doing it in tomato season. That's part of the sourness and the acidity that you need in the
Right.
soup. That's the first part. Then, when the soup is done, you add in a bunch of lemon juice. That's the second part of the acidity.
Or citric acid.
Or
which is a
citric
real-
acid.
Yeah, that's a really interesting
I don't ever add
blend.
citric acid. That is literally what she told me to add, and then said if you can't find it in Hawaii, add some lemon juice. And I could not find it in Hawaii, so I've never made it with that. But I've had her soup, and it's deliciously sour. And then you also add in a bunch of chopped dill and parsley at the end, the bright herbs, infuse the pot.
And then when does the sour cream come in? Because I love that that's an essential element and adding that richness to this very veggie soup. That to me seems like it would make everything.
Yeah, so the sour cream comes once you serve it. Everyone
Okay.
gets to add sour cream to their bowl to their
To
liking.
taste. Okay.
Jonathan always surprises me with how little sour cream he wants to add. I'm
And
always saying,
and you're surprised by this?
I'm always like, more, more. And he's like, no. I'm sort of joking, but he doesn't like a lot of sour cream, whereas I like a good, generous
Good,
spoonful.
yeah.
I have one last tip, which is If you have a Russian or Slavic or Eastern European store near you, do yourself a favor and try their sour cream. They will have their own sour cream. It tastes a lot more like creme fraiche than the sour cream you buy at any grocery store. It's less thick, but it's richer in flavor, and it is so good. So it's worth it. If you're already making a trip to that store, you're going to find beets, carrots, potatoes, dill
Yeah, all the
for
things that you need.
sure. All
Yeah,
the
I
things
love
you
that.
need. So I make it, pretty often in our lives, but I
Right.
haven't made it for a few months. And every time I kind of make it for the first time in the winter, I'm like, why am I not making this every other week?
What a wonderful thing to bring to a winter best bite is a soup that really doesn't require, besides a few vegetables and a little bit of sour cream, it can really feed a lot of people. And if you want to gather some people at your house, you miss your friends, you're feeling a little lonely in the winter, it really will brighten things up.
Yeah, I agree. Carrie, what was your best bite of the week?
So, yeah, my best bite also includes one of my favorite ingredients, which is cooked greens. And it's this vegetarian main recipe that I found several years ago. It's called Utica greens.
Utica. Why is it called Utica?
Well, it has a whole story. It kind of came out of Utica, New York. It came from a restaurant. It was popularized by Joe Morrell, who is the chef at the Chesterfield restaurant in Utica, New York. And there it was called Greens Morel, but I think it kind of morphed into a dish that a lot of people make at a lot of Italian restaurants. There's restaurants in New York City and Las Vegas and Florida that make this dish. And
Oh, I've never heard of it.
I'm wooed by the ingredients. I love cooked greens, and you make it in a cast iron skillet. And really, what it is greens, garlic, a little bit of prosciutto, although I don't always put that in if I don't have it. You kind of crisp that up, and cherry peppers. So it's a little bit
Oh,
spicy. And then it has breadcrumbs mixed with Parmesan cheese mixed with olive oil. And they call that an oreganata. So it's just Parmesan cheese, breadcrumbs, and olive oil. And so it makes the greens kind of crispy.
what kind of greens is it that the recipe calls for?
Well, the recipe calls for escarole, which is, it's a little bit of a heartier green. This time that I made it, I just pulled a bunch of really bitter greens out of my garden.
What are you
I
growing in your garden? I have to know.
I have a very wild garden and I haven't really tended it very much the last couple of years. But what I find amazing is that when you let things go to seed, the birds kind of carry the seeds everywhere. So I planted a bitter green, kind of like a radicchio, a few years ago, and it just keeps popping up all over my
Really? You
garden.
just have, this is also the gift of living in California that you can
Yeah.
have a garden year round.
And the greens are too bitter to eat raw. And so I harvested a bunch of them. I did a quick blanch on them, which is really not my favorite thing to do. I hate an extra step like that. But for this dish, I will do it. And so I just harvested a bunch of greens, cleaned them up, blanched them, and then what you do is you have olive oil, garlic, cherry peppers, which I found a couple at Whole Foods. You can use pickled peppers that you have in your fridge. So I just added some more of those. I didn't use prosciutto this time. Again, it's a nice sort of porky flavor if you want it, but you don't have to use it. You saute those down, you add the greens, and then you have this mixture that's kind of like sand. It's like breadcrumbs. I usually use a whole wheat panko breadcrumb with a lot of olive oil, like a half a cup of olive oil to a cup of breadcrumbs, and a half a cup of Parmesan cheese. And you cook that in.
Oh,
You
straight. It's not like a topping. It's like once
it's
the,
both. It's both. You set
oh,
some aside and then you cook some of that
oh.
in so it kind of gets toasted and you want to kind of keep turning it around because the Parmesan starts to stick on the bottom. And then once you've got that cooked through there, then you sprinkle some on top and you stick this under the broiler. And then it gets really crispy on top as well with the Parmesan cheese and the breadcrumbs. And then you serve it with a sliced baguette. It really can be a great meatless main. They suggest a glass of red wine, serve it with some bread. You kind of gather people around a table. I was invited to a dinner at someone's house and they were making a very Italian feast. So it was bolognese and pasta and chicken Milanese. I thought this was a really great side dish to offer because it really stands on its own. Depending on how many peppers you put in, it has a nice spiciness to it, along with that bitterness and then all that rich cheese. It's just delicious.
The kids eat this?
The kids eat this too. Yeah,
Really?
my son will eat this because he'll put anything on a piece of bread.
And wasn't too bitter or too spicy because it all kind of mellows together with that cheese and
It
the breadcrumbs and
Yeah,
everything.
and the olive oil and the garlic. It's one of those dishes that it's really unexpected, but it has all these great ingredients. It's one of the dishes that I like to serve to my son to kind of help his little palate along with those bitter flavors that he
Yeah.
doesn't generally love. Those bitter flavors are important. They're important to your palate and they're important to your nutrition.
The original recipe calls for escarole is really interesting to me because I love when I see escarole at the market, but I rarely buy it because I don't always know what to do with it. And this is a very up my alley kind of way to use escarole. But I love what also you're saying is any of the chicories are going to work. And I would even say like kale seems like
I
it
was
would
gonna
work
say you
here.
could use a mix of kale in this too. It definitely goes in the Italian direction with the prosciutto and the parmesan.
But I appreciate that you're saying you don't have to add it because obviously I
No,
wouldn't add prosciutto. So I love
and
that.
it's great without it. Like you're not
Yeah,
really missing it at all. It adds kind of an extra smoky flavor to it,
sure. That makes
but
sense.
yeah, but it really you don't need it. All that parmesan and all that olive oil and garlic is so delicious.
The takeaway for me too is that, okay, adding a little bit of cherry peppers, which you could find in the hot pepper section of your grocery store, or it sounds like you could even use a Fresno or some other kind of reddish hot pepper that you could find. Or if you didn't want pepper, leave it out. Because this topping that you're describing, where it's half a cup of olive oil to 1 cup breadcrumbs to half a cup Parmesan,
It's rich.
I want to use that topping on something else. It sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's really and I love that it has these two elements of you cook it in. It's not a pile of greens with stuff on top.
Love that. I also love that both these recipes today are kind of embracing winter vegetables, which
Yes,
is really something you and I both love to do.
really what we love to do.
Well, until next time,
Until next time, bye.
bye.
Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.